From the library of the New York Stock Exchange at the corner of Wall and Broad Streets in New York City, you're inside the Ice House, our podcast from Intercontinental Exchange on markets, leadership, and vision in global business. The dream drivers that have made the NYSE an indispensable institution of global growth for over 225 years. Each week, we feature stories of those who hatch plans, create jobs, and harness the engine of capitalism. Right here, right now at the NYSE and at ICE's 12 exchanges and 6 clearinghouses around the world. And now welcome inside the Ice House. Here's your host, Josh King of Intercontinental Exchange.
It's been a bad season, historically speaking, for my Boston Red Sox. The biggest payroll in the league and the defending world champions are well over spitting distance from a wild card spot. A recent headline from Dan Shaughnessy, the Boston Globe columnist, read, "Dave Dombrowski may have to take the fall for the Red Sox fall-off." If the human talent doesn't perform, the general manager, the HR guy really, may be out at season's end. I mean, if you were a shareholder of a public company and you had America's highest paid CEO on your payroll, wouldn't you want a playoff spot in your industry? Sure you would. And down in Foxborough, where the Patriots are readying their defense of the Super Bowl trophy, the quarterback Tom Brady has signed for another year. He's 42 and wants to play until he's 45, ancient by any actuarial measure of football performance, and all sides, player and team, are hedging their bets, able to walk away from the table if this year doesn't play out as planned, or one side or the other isn't generous enough when they come back to the negotiating table. So much is at stake for the franchise if its key man is absent from the huddle in 2020. Look, these are the human resources issues that we see play out in the sports pages every day of the week. If you look closely enough, you can see HR issues splayed across the rest of the newspaper as well, but they come in more camouflage disguises. Is the CEO's comp aligned with shareholder interests? Is the plant in the Midwest being closed and a new one being opened in Guadalajara? Has the spiraling cost of health insurance caused companies to cut back on benefits? Do millennials need beanbag chairs and ping pong tables to be productive in the workplace? And can I please work from home? If you total up all of the employees that work for all of the 2,300 companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange, to say nothing of contractors or other outsourced labor, you're talking in the neighborhood of 45 million people across all sectors across the globe. Think of that. Walmart alone, that's NYSE ticker symbol WMT, 2.3 million people. Kroger, that's NYSE ticker symbol KR, 443,000 people. Home Depot, NYSE ticker symbol HD, 406,000. You get the idea. You dive into the S1 of a company getting ready for an IPO in the New York Stock Exchange, there's a lot of similar language about how much depends on the talent around the table, not just the product on the shelves. From the men and women in the C-suite to those earning minimum wage, the responsibility for creating and maintaining a healthy, productive, champion workforce orbits around the CHRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer of any of those firms. It's a topic that's always fascinated me and one that we're going to explore in depth with my friend Doug Foley, an expert in the field and head of human resources for Intercontinental Exchange, right after this.
It's more than an iconic building or a global financial marketplace. It's anywhere technology, commerce, and people intersect. The innovation that makes people's lives better. Dreams that were once impossible are now realities. At the New York Stock Exchange, we help tech companies flourish and change the world. So go ahead, bring those ideas to life. We'll bring it to market. We are Living Tech.
Our guest today, Doug Foley, is Senior Vice President of HR and Administration at Intercontinental Exchange. Different companies put different pieces of the corporate structure puzzle in the HR function, and at ICE, Doug is responsible for both global human resources and the real estate functions and other things that he'll tell us about. Prior to joining ICE in 2008, Doug worked in the performance and reward practice at Ernst & Young and for Delta in a global compensation and reward role, both in Atlanta. During his tenure, ICE has grown from less than 800 employees and over 90% of those domestically based to now nearly 6,000 employees that span the globe, with over 1/3 based outside of the United States. Welcome, Doug, inside the Ice House.
No, thank you, Josh. Great to be here.
Let me start with a metaphysical question. I mentioned Tom Brady is 42. The stats guy is looking at his numbers, or the insurance company analyzing that term life policy they may write on Tom and Giselle. So much depends on the actuarial tables. You have the honor of being the first actuary we've had on this show, Doug. What do actuarial tables mean for all of us to understand? What should we know about them?
Well, first, a point of clarification. I worked as an actuary. I didn't pass enough exams to be a credentialed actuary, so I don't want to insult all those people that have.
It's a long road.
It's a long and dedicated road. Very early on, I realized that, maybe that's not the road for me. But as it relates to underwriting a policy on Tom Brady's fitness, I would never take the short side of that. I would never assume he's going to be out even before 45, maybe 46.
Our lifespans are getting longer. Our work expectancies, the time that we expect and hope to work, are getting longer because our retirement will otherwise get longer and we won't have enough money to pay for the rest of our lives. How close are you following these trends, and what do you see as the head of human resources about sort of how people are productive, whether they're into their 50s or 60s?
Yeah, it's interesting. I read a lot about that, but largely because I have a personal interest in just retirement planning and retirement in general. And you read all the time now that people are working until into their 70s. And some financial planners are telling people, work till you're 70. Don't start drawing your Social Security until you're 70, things like that. So I focus on it probably more out of a personal interest than a work interest. But we see it as ICE has evolved. When I started with ICE, you mentioned we were under 800 employees. ICE is a very young company, but we've purchased and partnered with some very old companies, and our workforce and the average age and the average tenure and the expectancy around those ages and tenures has changed so dramatically over the past 10 years that now we see people 65, 66 that aren't even close to retiring and are continuing to deliver results day in and day out beyond that of your average worker coming in.
And a person with 40 years experience under the belt is a very different kind of staffer, advisor, employee than a person with 10 years of experience under their belt.
Yes, absolutely. It's a great force to have around the office. As you pointed out, right, it's 40 years of life experience. And so, they can help shape and mentor and coach and soothe sometimes, if you will, your worker with 10 years experience who hasn't maybe seen as many cycles as somebody who's seen 40 years worth of cycles.
I know this may be a radical digression at this early point in the show, but we mentioned it at the beginning. You were studying or focused on being an actuary. You did actuarial work at the beginning of your career. What led to that?
I wasn't the greatest math student growing up, and then somewhere during college, the switch flipped, and I just developed an interest in math.
Where was college?
So I graduated from Georgia State, right in Atlanta.
And how did that switch flip? What were you doing beforehand, and why? Math.
I was interested in transferring over to Georgia Tech. Worked as a civil engineering assistant, apprentice, if you will. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to need to take more math, obviously. And so I started taking math classes, and all of a sudden, I just thought, you know what, I really like math. And while I'm interested in engineering, I really like math. And so I just decided to get a bachelor's degree, a bachelor's of science in mathematics. And then coming out of that, at that point in time, I thought I had two pretty distinct choices. One is I could be a math teacher, and I thought about that. And one is I could be an actuary, and I thought about that. And so I did my student teaching. I actually got a job offer to be a teacher, and the number was shockingly low. And I'd been dating somebody, my now wife, for quite some time. And she said, you should pursue that actuarial path. And as fate would have it, I got a phone call. A friend of a friend was leaving an actuarial position and was looking for somebody to backfill them. I got that interview, and I ended up getting that job at Ernst & Young, and I was on that path.
Were you already doing your prodigious saving at this point?
That's about that's when I started earning money. So that was the point at which I started saving.
And so the path through Ernst & Young, you also had a stop at Delta. Where did that fall in your trajectory?
So I worked at Ernst & Young and then Arthur Andersen for a couple of years, and then back to Ernst & Young. And then I realized, hey, this is my career path here. I'm going to be in and around HR. So I branched out from being working as a traditional pension actuary into executive benefits, executive compensation consulting. And I realized that if I ever want to have the the choice to work for a corporation in a more traditional HR role, I needed to go have that corporate experience. And so I was fortunate enough to get a role at Delta. That was about 8 years into my career. Get a role at Delta in executive compensation, and then I expanded out into some global compensation and benefits. But that was my chance to get experience, not on the consulting path and the advisory path, but instead real world in the company, HR experience. Went back to Ernst & Young and started working in an M&A setting, doing HR advisory work in an M&A setting, due diligence primarily. My very first client was ICE, and the role that I have now was held by a good friend of mine, Dan Kennedy. And so I got reconnected with Dan and connected to ICE, and for a couple of years, Dan would call when ICE was doing a deal. The very first deal that I got the call on was New York Board of Trade. And so we stayed connected for a couple of years, and I continued doing that work at Ernst & Young. And then after early 2008, Dan gave me a call and said he was thinking about leaving ICE, and if he did, was I interested in interviewing to backfill him? And I was. First, I berated him on why he would ever leave ICE, and then I realized he was retiring. So I was fortunate enough to interview, and even more fortunate to get the job. And here I am 11 years and about a month later.
We're going to spend a lot more time talking about ICE, but before we do, another radical digression in our conversation, because I think you bring some certain expertise that a lot of people will be interested in. I mentioned at the introduction the pathetic Boston Red Sox. Here is a clip of Aaron Judge of the Yankees batting against Sox ace Chris Sale.
Judge, who had never had a hit against Sale before tonight, has picked up 2 singles. Deep drive, center field, turning and looking is Bradley. See ya! Deep into the center field bleachers. The Yankees are on the board at 5-1.
You knew right off the bat where this was going, and you know, that's a deep part of this park. Aaron Judge, I'll tell you what, he's got things going, which he does tonight.
All rise. Here comes the Judge.
Doug Foley, the Elias Sports Bureau said Monday that batters hit 1,142 home runs in June, 7 more than in May. 5 of the top 6 home run months have been in the last 3 years. In addition to being an expert on the actuarial tables, you're also somewhat of an accidental expert on the manufacture of Major League Baseballs.
My dad ran the Rawlings baseball manufacturing plant in Haiti, just outside of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And so I grew up around baseballs, around people spinning baseballs, making baseballs. I didn't know a lick about baseball, had never seen a baseball game. We used to get them and uncover them. We would get all the misprints and misstitch, or if it had a scuff, things, all the rejects. My brother and I would actually take them apart and get down to the rubber core and just do all sorts of things with the ball by decomposing it. We didn't actually know what to do with it as a baseball. I was skeptical of it, honestly. We had spoken about that. I was a little skeptical of it, and then I saw the stats that when they introduced the new baseball into the minor leagues, I thought, wow, it's one thing to see it happening in the majors, and you can make all sorts of explanations. Then I read that article about it happening in the minor leagues, and I thought, wow, maybe it is the baseball.
But a kid whose household was full of rejected baseballs and dad was running the plant. I mean, I've been to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, all of maybe once in my life, maybe twice. Not the place that I go to regularly. How did the Foleys find themselves in Port-au-Prince?
My dad was a wild hare, and he was very interested in living and working overseas. So I was born in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and immediately within the first year of my life, he moved the family to Jamaica, Mandeville, Jamaica. He just loved working and living overseas. He liked kind of the free-spiritedness of it, if you will. I suspect he really liked the independence of it from whatever home office he was working for. So we lived in Jamaica and Mandeville for a little while, moved to Miami for a little while, then to Haiti. And again, when he told the stories, it was all about he just wanted to be back overseas, and so he was constantly looking for that next bit. And ironically enough, he ended up in Costa Rica, not with Rawlings, but and the baseball plant ended up in Costa Rica, not far from where he lived.
How many siblings do you have?
Just one, older brother, 4 years older.
And how are the Foley boys feeling about moving from Pennsylvania to Mandeville, Jamaica to Costa Rica, and the globe-trotting that your father really wanted to have as a part of his life? I was pretty young for the most of the moves, so I probably didn't have many feelings at all about it. I probably just went along. I know my brother, looking back on it, myself and my brother, I'll speak for him on this, loved the experience. It's unbelievable, the things that he exposed us to, the experiences that we got, parts of the world that we saw.
because of his free-spiritedness, which is, we're very grateful for that now. I know that.
I mean, do you think your dad's story of sort of moving around the globe, living internationally, shaped in some way your conservative approach to life and savings and a career that helps design the financial lives of others?
Very early, he pointed to things and he said, look, if you want that thing, whatever it is, we would go on a trip. Well, if you want to go on these trips, you want to take your children on these trips, you have to think about now, how are you going to make that happen? How are you going to save for that? How are you want that car? I would comment, I like that car. I like that boat. He said, well, print a picture out, put it over your desk. That's your motivation, study for that. So he was constantly hammering on, look, if you want something, you know what you want, put in the effort, go get it. But it's not just going to come to you. You've got to be motivated to go get it.
Doug, a new survey from Bankrate.com asked 1,000 working American adults how much of their annual income they set aside for retirement, emergencies, and other financial goals like that picture your dad had you put over your desk. The answer, more than 1 in 5, 21%, don't save any of their annual income. Why is that? What kind of a problem is it?
I think it's a huge problem. Many people are experts on this, and many people write on this, and it's clearly a huge problem. I think the painful reality for so many people is they're living paycheck to paycheck. It's how can I put $1 away for the future when I need that dollar today to get by? And so it's a very difficult choice. I know that, and everybody goes through that. And I can tell you my personal journeys. I couldn't save that $1 for the first paycheck, but I could save 5 cents, and then the next one it was maybe 6 cents, and just tried to work up that ladder.
Did you have automatic methods to do it, or all sort of like, here's how much I've saved this week, and stash it somewhere else?
Yeah, I definitely hid the money from myself, and honestly, I worked in college and I had an income in college, but all of that was going to just living and things you do in college. And then right away when I got my first paycheck, I said, okay, I got to hide some of this money. This is more money than I've ever seen. So I just need to hide it. So yeah, I would push it off. 401k was a great savings vehicle, but then I would also push some different money in accounts that I couldn't access easily.
Researchers, Doug, at the Stanford Center on Longevity project if you want to retire at age 65 and maintain your standard of living, you need to put 10 to 17% of your current income into a retirement account. And that's if you start saving as early as you were, stashing it away at age 25. Does that sound about right to you?
It does sound about right. It's the number that I aspired to when I was in my early 20s, and eventually I got to that number. It's not easy to do, and I'm not that that 10% number. I'm not even sure when people do the math and they grow and they progress. And you mentioned life expectancies, and I'm not even sure that number produces enough money. When you actually get to retirement. So it's a concern.
From this company, Intercontinental Exchange, which had 800 people when you joined, it now has close to 6,000. What did you have to do to scale your function from that time that you joined from Ernst & Young, you took over from your predecessor, in terms of people on the team, the expertise they had, the technology you used, the processes you put in place to serve that many people in all the countries in which ICE operates now?
Yeah, you used the thing that we focused on very, very early in my time at ICE was building the ability to scale. When I first joined in, the company was very, very small. A lot of things were still very manual. It all made sense for the size of company and type of company that ICE was right then and there. No question, it was perfectly fit for purpose. But to the extent that the company was going to grow twofold, threefold, fourfold, whatever it was, we knew that we had to change our methodology. It could no longer be arms and legs trying to process things and arms and legs trying to fight fires, but we needed to automate. So the very first thing that we did is we put in an HRIS system. So that got everybody on a global basis on the same page. So for example, when I started, if Scott Hill would come down and say, hey, what's our head count today? I actually had to pick up the phone and call people and ask, hey, well, exactly how many people do we have in London today? So my answer usually to him was, well, do you want the head count as of the end of last month? Because I have that in a spreadsheet. If you want it today, I have to go ask. So we really focused on, hey, how do we scale? How can we do more with the exact same number of people? What if our head count were going to be 2 times, 3 times? What would we need to be building and have in place today to be able to withstand that growth?
What would you say are the other big things that keep a global HR leader up at night?
If you read around this space, you read it all the time. It's, how do you ensure that your team members, the team members that really make the company produce results are engaged, stay engaged, are interested, involved team members. Every day, I think everybody can acknowledge that even throughout the day, you probably zone in and out of engagement. You have great periods where you just think, gosh, I'm on fire, I'm getting so much done. They have other periods you look back, you're like, what did I do the past 30 minutes? So it's how do we make sure that the team members on a global basis feel connected to the company, feel connected to our mission, feel connected to our clients. That's our mission, right? Serve our clients. And they're engaged in that as much as possible, as long as possible, each and every day.
The CEO of Vonage, Alan Mazarek, was a recent guest on this podcast and spoke about his policy, Doug, of personally reviewing the job description and resume of every single new hire as one way to maintain the right caliber of employee. Do you have a similar strategy?
We're not that heavy-handed. I will say that Jeff reviews and approves every single position that we open, so that he definitely has his finger on the pulse of the company's growth and where we are growing. So he's keenly focused on what types of positions are we adding, what types of positions are we losing people from and replacing people into. As it relates to reviewing the job description, just to make sure that the caliber of people, we're not quite that heavy-handed. I like to think that our talent acquisition team, and more importantly, our managers, the people that are making the hiring decisions, are keenly focused on finding the right level of talent, the right level of background, and the right level of cultural fit to keep us moving forward.
Talk about the right level of talent, the right type of talent. Press around the HR industry has been steadily banging the drums with headlines about the impending talent gaps for high-demand jobs, particularly, Doug, in technology. Are you already seeing an impact from this problem either directly at ICE or across the economy?
Yeah, no question. I feel like I've been reading that article for the past 20 years. I bet you could take that article and print it again in 20 years. Everybody will still look at that and say, yes, I'm feeling that. We feel that day in and day out. I know we feel it. I know our peers in the industry feel it. I know our peers just here in New York or in Atlanta or the other centers that we operate in, they feel it. Technology talent is scarce. And the more you want to narrow that statement down to, okay, well, technology talent, I need a Java developer, a C++ developer. As you start to narrow that, I tell you, it feels even more scarce as you narrow exactly what you're looking for. Talking to a 25-year-old today, if you don't know what you want to do, I don't know, become a developer and you will have a job for life.
Well, then what's the problem if people are worried about how their 5-year-old is going to eventually get a job? You've spent much of your career in Georgia with a great feeder system from Georgia Tech and the other local colleges and universities. The local FinTech industry has grown up around it, and the cost of living has historically been affordable. But why aren't we creating enough technology students and experts coming out of U.S. high schools and then colleges to be able to meet this demand?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I really do. I don't read enough to maybe even have a wildly informed view on that, but I tell you, just I have 3 kids ranging in ages from 18 down to 8. I definitely don't see in that elementary school, middle school, high school, I definitely do not see, at least in our little bubble, a heavy emphasis on STEM. It's there. If the kids are inclined toward it, that's great. Then they can excel in it. But there's not a real push into those areas, which I find curious. Look, I honestly think the best developer probably has a liberal arts undergrad and then goes back and gets a graduate degree in MIS or CIS or something like that. That they have the art and the science.
But there is one geographic advantage that ICE and other companies in Atlanta have always had, and that is that it is a magnet for FinTech and the financial technology sector, certainly Georgia Tech and the surrounding universities. Talk for a minute about maybe the advantages that ICE and its neighbor companies have had growing up and looking at talent, whether it's coming out of the schools or drawing them from other companies in the Southeast.
Yeah, I always say we were FinTech before FinTech was cool. I think that's a true statement. We've been FinTech all along. And to hear Jeff talk, I mean, you can hear it in everything that he was thinking when he just even thought about forming the company. We are very fortunate in Atlanta and here in New York. We have an office in Bedford, Massachusetts. So we are very close to some of these tech centers and tech universities, as you're pointing out, that crank out incredibly talented students and graduates that we're able to work with and deploy. So we have some great people on our team that came out of some of these universities. We also, honestly, we recruit on I would say it on a global basis. So there's a lot of great talent that moves into this country that has a technical background or a STEM background. And we found great immigrant labor from that perspective coming in from overseas.
I mean, anything about where you see the country headed now and its views toward immigration that gives you concern or pause?
We've certainly noticed it and felt it, and so we're very immigration friendly. We will sponsor visas for individuals, and that's become much harder. The process of getting a visa is much harder. The process of onboarding somebody who needs a visa transferred from a prior employer is much harder. And I'm not talking about, we don't import hundreds, thousands of people to come in to do technology jobs. I'm talking about day to day. We're trying to hire developer A from company X coming over to us. That process can take 6 to 8 months now to just transfer the visa from one employer to another, and I would that wouldn't be a problem if we had this robust talent pool of technology talent out there. But there's negative unemployment, so it's just as that immigration process gets harder, process gets longer. That we feel that pain every day.
If you think about your own experience at ICE or talk to your peers leading HR functions at other companies, what can companies do and what do you see them doing, the best ones, to keep the talent gap from becoming a critical impact on their ability to meet the needs of their customers?
Yeah, most people that I've talked to, what they try to do is they try to overhire. If I need 3, hire 6, because the 3 extra, something's going to happen. Life is going to happen. They're going to go to another company, whatever it is. So a lot of people I talk to are just trying to overhire, and that sort of exacerbates the problem, right? It's a never-ending cycle. But a lot of people try to overhire. The thing that I've found, and I think my peers have found, and people write about, is largely the technology talent want to work on exciting and new technology. When I got my math degree, I learned to program in Fortran. I can tell you there aren't many Fortran developers out there. Nobody wants to program in the old language or the old system, those sorts of things. It's, hey, what can I do to further my skills and just be, I as a developer, stay very interested in what I'm doing. And so that's something that ICE brings to the table, and being in that FinTech space is some of the things we're doing. Recently in the press is the Pillar launch here at NYSE and the matching engine. It's amazing the technology that we deploy. It might seem invisible or even innocuous to some people. Like, well, of course, you match buyers and sellers. Of course, that's easy, right? But when you really get in there and you think about the volume of transactions that we do, the types of transactions, right? All these different orders that run through there. It's really, really interesting stuff for developers to sink their teeth into. And when they see the volume, the numbers, the type of technology, the cycle that we go through on that, it's exciting stuff, and it keeps them very interested. And we're always looking for that next thing. What's the next great thing?
I mean, that's exactly what Mayur Kapani and Sridhar Masam were saying when they were on this podcast, talking about sort of the opportunity working at these exchanges to work on some of the most sophisticated trading technology in the world, certainly the most sophisticated trading technology in the world, has got to be a draw for people to come to ICE.
We hear it a lot from people that join. I don't think we do it good enough and I'm glad that Sridhar and Mayur did the podcast, because I don't think we do a great job of really staying out there in the marketplace and preaching, look at all this cool stuff that we're doing. But it is when you sit down and you talk to the teams that put these technologies in place and see their eyes light up on what they get to do and how quickly the tools will move, the orders from point A to point B to point C, and even we as just consumers, we see it, right? You go on I can remember one day trading a stock on my phone, sitting in an airport in a different country. The order came back confirmed. So it was amazing. I was amazed. I was on like the local Wi-Fi. It was amazing. It was confirmed back before I could even blink my eye.
HR leaders are often on the receiving end of a lot of feedback related to workplace culture. We've all seen The Office and the sparring between Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell, and Dunder Mifflin local HR chief Toby Flenderson, played so well for so many years by Paul Lieberstein. Let's take a quick listen.
Oh, and another fun thing. We, at the end of the night, are going to give the check to an actual group of Boy Scouts, right, Toby? We're gonna.
Actually, I didn't think it was appropriate to invite children, since it's, there's gambling and alcohol, and it's in our dangerous warehouse, and it's a school night, and Hooters is catering. Is that enough? Is that enough? Should I keep going?
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
Doug, how do professionals in your function overcome the stigma of being the Killjoy?
I just turn into it. I don't turn away to it. I turn into it. My wife gets furious. We'll meet people and, oh, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm Toby from The Office. I'm in HR. She's like, you're not Toby. I'm like, why hide from it? No, look, we don't. Fortunately at ICE, fortunately or not fortunately, I don't know which. Our role, my role, the role my team plays is in support of the business. So, providing Jeff, providing Scott, Chuck, Mayor, Sridhar, these folks, providing insight, opinions, guidance. Hey, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? That's what we do. Sometimes, we point out hey, look, here's where things can go wrong. I can remember a long time ago, Mark Wassersug wanted to put one of those machines where you hit it. You either hit the character or you hit the punching bag, and to measure the veracity with you. I said, that's fantastic. The team is going to love that. They're absolutely going to love it. I'm telling you that somebody's going to break something. The best that we can hope for is that they break the machine that Mark was going to buy himself, so that was his problem. But inevitably, somebody's going to break their hand, or worse, their foot, or
sledgehammer coming down on the foot.
Something bad is going to happen here. And you want to do it? Let's do it. Let's just know that this is what we might encounter along the way. He ultimately ended up not buying it. I think we really started to think through what could happen. But no, look, we just provide tools, guidance, knowledge. We try not to be the Killjoy. Occasionally, sometimes maybe that is the case. But somebody's got to do it.
Beyond the Toby Flenderson stereotype, though, Doug, what are some of the functions that HR is responsible for that really go beyond what most employees are aware of that you do?
I don't know that people know how often we are simply playing connector. Everybody knows we run payroll and benefits and compensation, the tactical things. But one of the roles that I think that we play well, and I think HR in general can play very, very well, is just connecting people on topics, whether it's because you're trying to solve a problem. We talk to a lot of people. We're in a lot of different conversations, and we get a lot of different pieces of information. And a role that we play is bringing people together where, oh, hey, wait, Josh said something, Steve said something. I got to bring these two people together because they're not talking. I don't think people see that, and honestly, they don't need to see that. And it's different from the just conflict resolution where HR is trying to bring people together, but it's really just trying to tie together business topics, business initiatives, pieces of information that we're gleaning from different parts of the business to say, wait, you guys get in a room and you're talking about very, very similar things, similar resource needs, similar approach. Is there something here?
Bringing people together, the role of the connector. After the break, Doug and I delve into how companies are preparing to staff the workforce of the future and the importance of validating that a company practices what it preaches. That's right after this.
And now a word from Chip Berg, CEO of Levi Strauss & Company, NYSE ticker LEVI.
There's no other brand in the world like Levi's. We're here today because of the dedication of the 15,000 employees that we have around the world. Growth is being driven across the company. Men's, women's, tops, bottoms, outerwear. Virtually every country in the world grew last year. Being associated with an institution that goes back further than Levi's is special. This is where this company deserves to be.
Welcome back inside the Ice House. Before the break, Doug Foley, Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Administration at Intercontinental Exchange, and I were discussing how a company develops its workforce and the seeds of its company culture. So, Doug, let's go back to November 19th, 2013, on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, where we are today, or a couple floors above it. CNBC's Bob Pisani asked ICE CEO and founder Jeff Sprecher about integrating his newest acquisition, NYSE Euronext, into ICE. Let's take a listen.
Before we let you go, I want to put up the revenues indicating where you get your money from, because you get your questions about the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and yet only 5% of the revenues of this combined company come from the cash equities business. That's U.S. stocks. You're basically a futures company, oil futures, agricultural futures. Where is the growth going to come from for you? You're going to spin off the European cash equities business, Euronext. You've said you want to IPO it, but where is the growth for you?
Well, what you're seeing there is that we are a multi-asset class network where we can sit on people's desktops and allow them to trade everything around the world. That's the goal. And it all feeds on each other because capital is quick to move around. It is global. And that's what we want to do. The New York Stock Exchange, while it's small, it's an important part of what we do. And I think it is a growth engine for us.
Putting two companies together, integrating two cultures after a merger, two teams, one future. It's happened a lot at Intercontinental Exchange. What's the secret sauce, looking back in some of these experiences, in your view, in making it work?
Yeah, that's a great clip. That was a great day. Look, for us, every deal is different. The secret sauce for ICE is not the same as the secret sauce for another company. So what we have learned is to stay true to ourselves. We are incredibly good integrators, incredibly good operators. We make decisions very, very quickly. We're very transparent about the decision-making process. We're very transparent once we've made decisions. We understand that you're not going to make everybody happy with every decision, and we don't try. That's not the goal. The goal is to achieve the business outcomes that we're after, whether it's integrating companies, realizing synergies, whatever it is. We have put together a playbook and a team that is very good at staying on task and getting the objective accomplished as fast as possible, and we just don't stray from the mission. Again, it's not secret, and it might not work at the way we approach things might not work at different companies, but yeah, no, we've become very, very good at that, and I think it's largely we stay very outcomes focused, and we understand we're going to break a few eggs along the way. It's not personal. It's never personal. It's not that we're out to break that egg. It's just going to happen. But we've honed that over the years and have become very good at it, I think.
We recently had the chairman of Nokia on this show, Doug. When looking back at their merger with Alcatel-Lucent, he said that the integration process was purposefully blind to whether a manager was originally with Nokia or Alcatel when creating a new reporting line. How does ICE begin the process of integrating a new team into the overall ICE structure?
We typically know that the end state that we're trying to get to. I think everybody does that, is trying to define that. What's that end state going to look like? But honestly, sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you don't know, and that doesn't stop us. We're not afraid to just start down the path and start and figure it out as we go. We know some things going in. The culture that we bring to the table, if we're buying somebody, is the culture we're going to end up with. And part of that culture is being very aggressive around decision making, very, very focused on speed to execution, very transparent. And sometimes, we just start down the path and find our way versus having the end in mind. A lot of times we know we're going to try to end up, and that makes it a little bit easier. But sometimes we don't know. For example, you made that clip from when we closed on NYSE. We didn't always know that NYX was a much, much bigger company than us. We didn't always know what we were going to find. We didn't know exactly where we needed to be, but we knew the first step we needed to take, and then we took that, and we knew the next step, and so on and so forth. So for us, it's staying true to our culture, staying true to that mission, being as transparent as possible. That's always worked out very, very well for us. And you referenced some companies will be blind to where the individual, where the decision maker came from. And more often than not, we are blind to that. It's not that there's no loyalty, but it's, hey, look, it's who can help us best achieve the business outcomes. And sometimes that comes from ICE, and sometimes that comes from the company that we're partnering with. It's not a factor that drives the decision.
I mean, sometimes you don't have all the talent you need in-house or certainly acquired through a merger. Is there a science to balancing internal promotion and advancement through external talent acquisition?
So many great people have come to ICE from deals. I mean, think about this building we're in here at 11 Wall. ICE wasn't in this business. So much great talent came to Intercontinental Exchange through this deal. So much great talent came through the more recent acquisition of Interactive Data Corporation. Look back at all the deals ICE has done. You get great, great talent in these deals. And honestly, I think Jeff has done some deals because of the great talent that it brings. So opportunity begets opportunity. The deals particularly beget opportunity. So you get great influx of new talent. You also have an opportunity to promote. We always strive to promote from within. But honestly, when you're partnering with a company, you're merging with a company, buying a company, that's within also. So the promotion set grows through deals. We're always looking to promote from within. But when I say that, that means also we're promoting the people that came via acquisition. But that creates so much opportunity for people to stretch their legs, stretch into a new role, stretch into a new project. Sometimes, after a few years, they kind of settle back to the role they were in, but they had 3 years, 2 years of working on a new initiative, a new project, a new technology that they wouldn't have otherwise had to look at.
So Jeff Sprecher, Scott Hill, Ben Jackson, and other members of ICE's leadership have talked about ICE's culture on this show. But for the person responsible for filling out the ranks of ICE, top to bottom, with people who will work well within this culture, how would you describe what it is?
Yeah, I have a lot of little elevator speeches on this, and I figured this one would come up, and I struggled with which elevator speech, and so I was going to do two. So one I try to emphasize on people with people when I speak to them is it's deceptively intense. You guys have sat down with Jeff, incredibly humble, incredibly almost soft-spoken, if you will. But never mistake that for a lack of intensity. I try to describe that to people when I talk to them. I say, you're going to meet with people, they're going to be very casual, very informal, very approachable, but don't misunderstand that. You can be all those things and incredibly intense about achieving success for our customers and our clients and our teammates. And so it's deceptively intense. And then I meant to go cite this. This is from a book. It's humble, it's hungry, and it's smart. So if you can be humble, hungry, and smart, you're going to fit very, very well at ICE. And also back to don't ever get fooled by that humility.
Maybe I'll focus a little bit on that middle thing, hungry, and the literal sense of being hungry. You're responsible for corporate real estate, Doug, along with human resources, but the two are often intertwined. The setting here at the NYSE, it's a historic building in itself, is very different from ICE's headquarters in Atlanta. Cool, clean, futuristic, with farm-to-table food in the cafeteria. I haven't seen any ping pong tables at ICE, but what have you learned in your career about real estate and how it serves as a motivator or a demotivator?
Yeah, please let me know if you find a ping pong table at ICE. From a real estate and office perspective, I'm very fortunate in that Jeff is keenly interested in the topic as well. He's got an eye toward design, and he has a very strong opinion about how workspaces should lay out, how they should function. He understands and helps us invest in design decisions that will help from a human interaction perspective. So all the way back to our early days, we were putting connecting staircases between floors. So we would rent 2 floors in a building, and of course they have fire stairwells that you could use, but we'd
blow out a staircase.
We'd blow out a staircase. We did it in Midtown. We do it in Atlanta. We actually built a staircase on the side of our building in Atlanta to connect people. So we genuinely believe, look, I've learned over the years, you can't make all people happy with real estate decisions. And I always say my goal is to make everybody equally unhappy. So whether it's all open plan or all offices or huddle rooms or not huddle rooms, furniture, this furniture, that furniture, we firmly believe that office design, office environment absolutely plays into employee engagement. It plays into employee interaction. It plays into our success. And you see that we invest a reasonably big number of dollars in making sure that people have a great place to work.
Sometimes you have to check in periodically to see if it's as great a place as you think it is and whether the company is actually living up to its values and its ideals. You can listen in to conversations in the cafeteria, hold focus groups with employees, or survey them. How important is it to tap into the pulse, and how do you do it?
I think it's very important, and that how we do it, how I do it, how we do it has evolved over the years. We used to be small enough that you could just go talk to people. It was that easy. You could talk to people in different offices. You knew who those connectors were in those offices, that if you talked to the right people, you could get the pulse, after a few conversations. We've grown, the process has evolved, and more recently we did our first employee survey, and that survey was specifically designed to say, look, we espouse this culture. We actually write the culture down. We call them our competencies. And so what we did is we designed a survey that says, are we living these competencies? We tell you this is the roadmap to success at ICE in the competencies. And so we actually did a survey that said, okay, are we actually living that? Do you see that every day? So as we've gotten bigger, more dispersed, that's how we're doing it now, is through that survey.
And when did you know that the time was right to do it? And what did the survey find out? And were there any surprises to it?
We knew it was right because we knew that a collection of senior people getting together in a room couldn't necessarily represent, here's everything that my people, my team members are thinking. And so we knew that we were geographically dispersed. It was hard to get firsthand accounts, firsthand opinions on the pulse, if you will. So it was time to go out there and get just objective and anonymous feedback. So we did that. I don't know that we were surprised by the results. I think we were, everybody reads statistics slightly differently. I was surprised at the consistency of results, and I think maybe that's where our surprise came from. I would have speculated that different offices would have had different hot buttons, different countries would have had different hot buttons, but what we found was incredibly consistent throughout the geography and throughout the offices, incredibly consistent. That surprised me. And then looking back, I think that that's a testament to the culture, the way Jeff runs the company, the way he really talks about ICE. It's just one ICE. It's one Intercontinental Exchange. So it's one culture. And so I think that was a surprise on the good side that, hey, we really do have a consistent culture, and we're having the same growing pains throughout the company instead of this building feels a different way from that building.
What does it take to maintain between surveys the environment that encourages feedback up and down the chain of command?
It's a daily challenge. I don't know that we've figured out the exact way to do that or the most efficient way to do that. We try to tackle it from a number of different perspectives, as you'll know, right? We push out a lot of communication saying, if you have feedback, provide it. Email this person or that person. For example, when Scott does his quarterly videos after earnings, talking about results, talking about what's ahead, he's very consistent in his videos and or his written message of, if you have feedback, please provide it. We really, really, really try to push out through the manager ranks. Ask for, seek out, solicit that feedback. Don't just assume because you're not hearing anything, people don't have anything to say. Ask for that. We try to drive it through the management chain. We try to drive it through corporate communications. We try to drive it just in direct messaging. When Jeff does a video, he'll say in there, if you have feedback, please provide it. We come at it from all sides. I still think we can do more and better because I know people are reticent to provide that feedback. It is valuable when you get it.
Share, I made brief light of it at the top of the show, flexible work arrangements. It's a question that comes up at most companies, certainly all the companies that I've ever worked at, especially with multiple generations represented among the workforce. How do you strike the right balance, Doug, between flexibility and the collaboration that comes when you get around a table like this in the office and look a colleague right in the eye?
I wish I knew the exact answer. That is something that we spent a lot of time talking about, and up until this year, we didn't have any work from home. We genuinely believe there is so much value in the human interaction, and we talked about real estate just a second ago, bringing people together in an office, having them collaborate, whether it's while they get coffee, while they run into each other on the staircase, while they're sitting next to each other, can they get into Scrum, whiteboard together. We really believe that there's a lot of value in those human interactions. So that's just it's a core principle. We think that's true. Other companies may think it's not true or it's different for them, and then that's great. Different answers for different folks. So for the longest of times, ever since ICE was formed, we did not have a work from home policy. We heard it. You mentioned it right. We heard it loud and clear in that employee survey that work from home was important to people, and so we took a first step into it this year, and we did it. We started with 1 day a week. Okay, for certain roles. Work from home 1 day a week, and we'll see how that goes.
Early signs?
Early signs are very, very positive. It's been in place now for 6 months. Everything is positive. And I don't mean that people are happy they can work from home 1 day a week. I would have expected that, so I wouldn't be surprised that I'm hearing that, and I am hearing that. What I'm hearing is manager feedback has been very, very positive. I talked to a lot of people about this. Are you having difficulty connecting with team members? Do you feel like that human connection is lost? Do you feel like the fewer interactions are causing less innovation, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm hearing nothing but very positive things from managers because they're hearing very positive things from their team members of, hey, that affords me, and I don't have to sit in traffic, and I actually work longer, and I'm happy, or whatever it is. So early signs are very positive.
We've been talking mostly about the main bulk of our workforce, but of course, so much attention is paid to the leadership of companies and aligning that leadership with shareholder interests. Tesla CEO Elon Musk always gets a lot of headlines, but he got them earlier this year for a pay package worth $2.3 billion, not just the highest of the year, but the highest ever, according to compensation experts. Going back to your time at Ernst & Young up to the present moment, what's Foley's view of how to get the most out of senior management?
This is another topic I read a lot. It's in the news a lot, so it's hard not to read a lot about. I feel like the pendulum here swings back and forth, and you can talk about a lot of different perspectives on this in terms of quantum. Are executives paid too much? You can talk about executive pay in terms of ratios. Well, are executives paid too much relative to the average worker? You can talk about the relative alignment of pay, right? Are executives paid too much relative to their performance? You can take a lot of different perspectives on this. My personal view is I feel like we've gotten to this stage where we're over-engineering it on some level. We're just overthinking this. I suspect that the vast majority of CEOs, the vast majority of senior management teams are intrinsically motivated to succeed, to have a performance scorecard for their company that is better than their peers. They just want to win. I suspect if you could actually open up all these executives' heads and see what makes them tick, it's not, am I going to make another dollar? It's going to be, am I going to beat my competition? So aligning pay with performance, 100%. We should do that. I think we do. I think ICE does a great job at that, and I think a lot of companies do a great job of that. But the amount of energy that is spent on, should it be this performance measure or that performance measure? Should it be 60% on this performance measure or 50% on this performance measure? Just so much energy is spent on trying to precision tune something that I'm not sure is the driver behind performance. I think it's more about just linking to performance. So I think maybe it's over-engineered.
It probably is over-engineered, and you probably can spend too much time reading about it and putting it into force. But of those, whether or not it's used at ICE, what are some of the stats and measures that you think are particularly interesting about the way people are measuring performance these days?
I'm always interested, and I have been for a long time, that the economic value added, that EVA model, has been around for a long, long time, and it's almost making a bit of a resurgence. I'm always intrigued that model is so dialed in. Pay is talked about in relation to the EVA model. It's a great model. It shows you a lot of things, and I get that. I just think public companies have a marketplace that tells you, hey, what the company is worth. And when the company valuation and EVA type number start to diverge, which one do you go with?
Companies certainly pay a lot in executive compensation. Sometimes they get what they pay for, sometimes they don't. But they also pay a lot for health insurance and health care for their employees. From the CEO on down, workers have traditionally looked to their employer to provide medical insurance. It's a debate that will continue through the next presidential election, many years beyond that. According to Mercer, Doug, the average per employee cost is now topping $13,000 among employers at companies with 500 or more employees. What are companies doing to contain the cost, shift some responsibility to individuals, but also remain competitive and maintain that culture that they want to have?
Companies are looking to shift that cost and risk across the table to employees and fix company cost and company exposure. So you see that with these high deductible plans, for example. You're shifting a lot of the risk and the variability of healthcare spend from the company, which you would find in a more traditional model. The company would bear a lot of that risk, and you're putting it over on the employee. So the company's exposure to that risk and to that volatility is fixed. And so that it's just that fundamental shift from a variability, risk, and cost over to employees. That's how companies are addressing that. Not everybody is doing that. I'll tell you, at ICE, we still have a very traditional approach that you can choose. If you individually don't want to bear that risk and don't find some of the benefits in these high deductible health savings account type plans, or we have that high deductible health savings account type option for you if you want it. So you can pick between the two. I know plenty of employers that have stopped the former in favor of the latter. But you nailed. That's exactly what people are doing.
We've covered a lot of the burning topics in the human resources landscape in our conversation here today, Doug. But as we wrap up, what do you think are the biggest challenges that companies will face in the human capital front, call it over the coming 10 years?
for the next 10 years and beyond, we're going to continue to struggle with the pool of talent around STEM, around technology. That's been in the news for 20 years. It's going to be in the news for 20 years. And as you read about the labor force changes, not just around STEM, but just as baby boomers retire and those sorts of things, that is going to be a big, big problem. So scarcity of talent, scarcity of the right talent is going to be a big, big problem for us. I also am intrigued at how, from an HR perspective, that AI technology is going to come in. You mentioned it in the hire and recruiting perspective. I suspect, it's not that far off. Maybe it's within 10 years that when we have a question around HR, and we get a lot of questions, that we're not always going to be talking to a person, that the machine on the other end is going to know enough and have enough experience to answer your question and to understand what you're trying to ask it. And so, whether it's I think probably the pedestrian way to say it is a chat bot, or it's true AI on the other end of that IM screen, I suspect within 10 years we're going to see that readily available.
And if they aren't chatbots, Doug, but in the face of this pool of talent that companies like ICE are always looking for, if someone's listening to this podcast and says, I want to work at ICE, what do you do?
Well, one, let us know you want to work at ICE, right? So we are very, very good about pushing out all of our openings are out on our website at intercontinentalexchange.com. And even there, you can just click a link and send an email, send an unsolicited resume in. We look at absolutely every one of those. We catalog absolutely every one of those. We dip into those when we open new positions to see if we already have somebody on hand that might be a good fit for it.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Thanks so much for spending some time with us inside the Ice House, and we'll keep our eyes on baseballs and see if they keep flying out of the park and see if we keep hiring people and keep acquiring companies and integrating them. So great conversation. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Josh, thank you.
That's our conversation for this week. Our guest was Doug Foley, Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Administration at Intercontinental Exchange. If you like what you heard, please rate us on iTunes so other folks know where to find us. And if you've got a comment or a question you'd like one of our experts to tackle on a future show, email us at icehouse@theice.com or tweet at us at IceHousePodcast. And as Doug said, if you want to work at ICE, go to intercontinentalexchange.com. Our show is produced by Pete Ash and Teresa DeLuca with production assistance from Ken Abel and Stephen Romanchik. I'm Josh King, your host, signing off from the library of the New York Stock Exchange. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.
Information contained in this podcast was obtained in part from publicly available sources and not independently verified. Neither ICE nor its affiliates make any representations or warranties, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information and do not sponsor, approve, or endorse any of the content herein, all of which is presented solely for informational and educational purposes. Nothing herein constitutes an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy any security, or a recommendation of any security or trading practice. Some portions of the preceding conversation may have been edited for the purpose of length or clarity.